Just going to give us about 30 seconds to let some people transition, and we're going to jump right in. All right, so I think we got everybody in the main room. So once again, good morning and welcome. My name is Jacob Henderson. I'm a senior performance management consultant on the talent team in HR. And what I'm going to be talking about with you today is leading through disruption, managing remotely. As part of that series is some tips for having meaningful performance conversations. This is exciting for me because about 98% of my time is spent talking through how to click buttons in Workday. And so while that's important, this is the most important piece of the actual performance experience here at UVA. But now that we're getting more comfortable with Workday and getting our bearings, it looks like this is a great time for us to really start focusing on how to have the conversation. So we got some tips for you today that hopefully help you out. So first and foremost, and we do have Kate supporting me in the chat. If you have questions, as she'll queue those up for at the end. We're going to breeze through all the slides so everybody can hear what we have to say, and then I'm sure we'll do questions there at the end. And then Kate will also be posting in some links when I reference them as well. So first and foremost, let's talk about engaging your team members. The core of any conversation is engagement, and performance conversations are essentially a collaboration between you, the manager, and the team member to move the organization forward. So in order to accomplish the organization's priorities, you and your teams need to be actively engaged in the process. So how do you engage? Here's a few tips specific to the performance that can help. The first one is make sure you set clear expectations. Even if you're holding the final year-end conversation, it should be clear what has been done to meet or exceed expectations, and also make clear what needs to be done or could have been done to meet or exceed. You also want to talk about the gaps or things that were more challenging for the team member. Side note, I prefer that term challenging, like saying what challenged you or what challenges did you experience, versus using the terms such as areas you need to improve or what you need to work on. This mainly because many areas of work are challenging, so it's a way to refer to it, and that's a little less damaging to the ego than saying someone needs improvement. And next bullet is that we are the most engaged in our work when we can utilize our strengths and work on the things we're interested in. It's really that simple. So always review with your team members how their strengths help move the organization forward. And the key to all of this is for your team member to feel supported. And that means the conversation and your assessment of their abilities has to be fair. It should be very clear where the bar is set and how high the team member has jumped, so to say. And your expectations and assumptions or assessments, as you could imagine, must be objective. To do this, it's best to speak to the behaviors and the outcomes as much as possible, citing specific examples. And again, always show where the strengths make the greatest impact. All of this will make a team member feel supported in their work, and it will engage them. So, how do you have a meaningful conversation, especially one based on performance? Again, conversations should be collaborative, and there's nothing better than a good old-fashioned open-ended question. Open-ended questions help team members come to the self-realization on their own. The trick is to ask the right questions that guide them towards thinking more about their actions and how they approach their work. So here are a few simple but very effective examples. What are you most proud of achieving this year? This is a great one to start with. It warms up the team member, gets them thinking positive in the beginning. And the only time I wouldn't suggest this, however, is with someone who didn't meet expectations, but we'll talk about that a little later. Otherwise, one of the best questions you can ask right in the beginning. The next question, what were some of your greater challenges? What did you learn? This question goes back to what I said about avoiding the area improvement language. Asking about their challenges encourages them to talk and think through what worked and didn't work. In essence, what did they do or didn't do that or could have done better? If If you have a team member who more often tends to place blame on external forces, you can follow up with the question, what could you have done? Or what actions could you have taken to overcome the obstacle? The next two questions also go back to what I was saying about focusing on a person's strengths and passions to engage them. So what do you want to accomplish in the coming year? And how can you utilize your strengths to make that happen? Both of these helps talk about a person's strengths and could even help identify a weakness as well. The last example, how can I help you to be successful, should really focus on helping the team member achieve their career goals. Now, if you haven't asked one of your team members about their career aspirations, like what they want to do a year or 5 or 10 years from now, now's the time to ask. As a managers, I challenge you to know the career the career aspirations of every team member on your team. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with the question, what are you most proud of achieving, and not suggesting that with someone who does not meet expectations. Let's talk about that real quick. If you have a poor performer, the conversation should be more direct. You want to get right to the point and make it very clear. You don't want to send any mixed messages. But this is my favorite part of performance management, where I get to say, always engage with your HR business partner or employee relations to ensure that your documentation and what you plan to discuss is very appropriate for rating somebody a low rating or having that really difficult conversation. However, you can always reach out to myself and any other member of the talent team to help with having difficult conversations. We hold entire courses on giving and receiving feedback where we talk about these exact type of scenarios. And since we are in a very unique time of the year with this pandemic, and every time I present, either a 4-year-old or a very needy golden retriever scratches at my door, and right now it's the golden retriever, so if you'll bear with me while I let her in. Sorry about that. So next, this is actually my favorite part because it's the most important part of the conversation. It's actually the part where you don't say anything. Listen attentively. You should try to listen more than you talk with performance conversations, really with anything in life, to be honest. So I've researched the receptivity of feedback and its effectiveness in very great depths. And I do this since we teach and preach all about the importance of feedback, etc. And what I can tell you that I found is that basically a person's personality is the ultimate factor in whether or not they're going to accept feedback and use it, or resent it and discard it. But what I can tell you is that listening more will help with all personality types. We all want to be listened to. There's a joke that, majority of conversations are with yourself, and sometimes people join in. You want the conversation to be collaborative, and listening is one of the best ways to be collaborative. So using the tools we just shared, trust the process, and you'll be surprised how easily these conversations will go. When people feel supported and fairly evaluated, they will be more engaged in accepting of results. By listening more, you're allowing them to share their thoughts and feelings. And by asking open-ended questions, they must think through their own actions and reflect on the outcomes. If you dictate and dominate the conversation, then a team member will think the conversation is all about you, and you'll risk appearing unsupportive, biased, and unfair. Something else I'd like to bring up. The title of this slide says, listen attentively. With the sudden move to remote work during everything that's going on, it's very critical that the conversation has no interruptions. And sometimes a phone call is much better than Zoom. It's less technical, there's less of the other interruptions, and some people are just more used to talking on the phone. The key is you want a clear, open channel of communication. The other thing is to eliminate all your distractions before you have the conversation, especially performance review conversations. Everyone can hear the typing in the background or the pause in a response if you're multitasking. If you have to take notes, that's fine. I just recommend a quiet pen and pad setup. Again, it can get distracting for somebody who's from a team member. It can be very, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but it's just a very kind of tense moment because you're talking about some stuff that, unless you're having these conversations regularly, which is a tip I'll add here as well, this is a very important conversation, and it's not always the easiest for some people, but when you keep everything clear and open, it goes a lot better. We're also in a period of the time, like you just experienced with yours truly, where the random kid is saying mommy or daddy in the background, is pretty normal, and all of a sudden that cat kind of appears on the keyboard. So this is all kind of stuff that just happens now, given everything going on. But intentionally not paying attention has never been acceptable. So please keep the communication open and clear to support your employees. All right, so Workday. Everything we just talked about doesn't have to happen just once a year. And despite the surge in aspirin consumption after UVA launched Workday, Workday does actually have 2 nifty tools for documenting throughout the year. We'll share the links to the job aids on how to use the feedback feature in Workday in the chat. This tool can be used in a number of ways, but you as a manager can use it to give direct feedback to your team members. You could have a conversation at any time and then send a brief summary of it via this feedback feature, for example. It is documented in the employee's profile where they can view it, as well as anyone in your management chain. It's also a great recognition tool as well. Another feature is the comment box on your goals in Workday. When you navigate to a person's profile page, you can go to their performance page in Workday by however you get to your team member, whether you search their name in the search bar or you click on your org chart and you click on the person. But if you notice, there's always that blue column to the left. Look for that performance link, and when you open it, it takes you right to the goals page, and you can click on any of their goals and look for a little chat or kind of caption at the bottom of the goal. This is where you can add comments throughout the year. The nice thing about this box is that these comments can be deleted anytime. They stay with the goal, so you see them when it gets pulled into their year in review. And the employee can add notes there as well, and they can see the notes. So it's a really flexible kind of note-taking tool. So I couldn't even go 15 minutes without getting into something technical about Workday, but again, luckily most of this conversation was about the most important part of the performance process is that you have these conversations. And again, not just once a year. If you can at a minimum have a conversation about a person's performance and their career aspirations about 4 times a year, that's great. You're really going to see some positive results in satisfaction engagement. And also try to sneak some in there, like at the end of every major project or, team event is another thing. So that's all I have today. Coming up next is this Thursday, we have Kate Bellevue, an L&D consultant in rewards and also including some rewards and recognition team members. You're going to talk about the low cost, no cost ways to recognize employees. This is great as they'll share some tips on how to engage and recognize employees, especially when working remotely. You can request our services via virtual delivery. My contact information is there if you wish to reach out to me directly to talk more about holding meaningful conversations around the performance review time or any other questions related to performance. We also have a formal request form. Kate, I think will be providing that link in the chat for you of where to go to request services from the talent management team. Also, your feedback is very important to us. Please provide feedback on today's course, choosing one of the following options. You can use this fancy QR code. I think if you take a picture of it, despite being a millennial, I don't think I'm very familiar with QR codes, but I think if you take a picture of it, it'll link you to where you can go right into the feedback all nice and easy. And Kate's also providing a link in the chat box.
Yes, the link is in the chat, and that's actually right, Jake. All you have to do is pull up your camera. You don't even have to take the picture.
Wow. Okay. I'm definitely on the cusp of not being a millennial. Okay, with that, do we have time for questions, Kate?
We have a few minutes or a few seconds. If anyone has any, we'll hang on the line for a little bit.
So feel free to use the chat box or unmute yourself and ask away.